Alina Smirnova had recently started at a new school. She came from a neighborhood where fighting skills were vital. 8 years of martial arts training had turned her hands into truly powerful weapons. She already had a black belt. Despite this, she remained reserved and withdrawn. But the bullies didn't notice. In their eyes, she was just a quiet, lonely girl with dark skin, an easy victim. So they constantly attacked her, threatened her, and demanded things. Gradually, the persecution became more and more severe. One day, they crossed all acceptable boundaries. After that, there was laughter, and someone said that she deserved it. There was silence in the hallway. Everyone was watching, but Alina did not break. The bullies thought that she was weak and would endure everything. They were wrong. Before continuing, write in the comments what region you are watching this video from, and be sure to subscribe because tomorrow's water story will be incredibly exciting. You will not want to miss it. The alarm rang exactly at 5:30 in the morning, but Alina Smirnova was already on her feet. She looked at the unfamiliar ceiling of her new room. Detroit seemed like a distant past to her, although only 3 days had passed since their truck with things left their previous place. She got out of bed and headed to the basement, where her mother had already hung a punching bag in the corner. 40 minutes later, her body was covered in beads of sweat from the morning workout. Jab, cross, hook, uppercut. The movements were like breathing. 8 years of training had made them natural, but today they seemed especially important. Today, Alina desperately needed breakfast. Her mother called from upstairs saying, "Alina, breakfast is ready." Irina Smirnova was standing at the stove, still in her uniform after a night shift at Millbrook General Hospital. She asked, "How are you today, dear?" Alina answered calmly, grabbing a piece of toast. "Normal. Just another day of school." Irina's gaze was filled with anxiety. She knew that adaptation would be far from easy. Millbrook was very different from everything they were used to. Different is too mild a word, she added to herself. When Alina crossed the threshold of Millbrook School, thousands of light-skinned classmates confirmed her fears. Of the 800 students, the number of dark-skinned could be counted on the fingers of 2 hands. The hallways were filled with the usual morning noise, but the conversations ceased when she passed by. Barely audible whispers could be heard behind her. She kept her head up and her shoulders relaxed, as they taught in martial arts school. Do not show weakness, but do not provoke conflict. The first biology lesson passed rather calmly. The second, history, was tolerable, but the real tests began with lunch. The cafeteria became a social arena. The popular kids occupied the central seats, the athletes dominated the corner, and the theater actors settled by the windows. Alina took a sandwich and began to look for a free seat. "Well, look who has come to visit us," a voice sounded through several tables. Mikhail Belov, almost 2 meters tall, stood a few steps away from her. His confident gait spoke of a man whom no one dared to question. Leatherman's jacket sat perfectly on his broad shoulders, and his smile did not hide his power among those around him. Alina's gaze lingered on the cold blue eyes behind which Oleg Vasilyev was quickly snapping his fingers. Mikhail Belov stood nearby. Laughing quietly, the dining room fell silent. All eyes were on the growing tension in the middle of the room. Alina continued on her way to an empty table, but Daniil blocked her way. His voice was confident, with the authority that everyone here knew so well. He needed to talk to her. Without hesitation, she met his gaze. About what, exactly? About how things were organized here. A wide smile spread across Daniil's face, as if revealing too many teeth. "You understand? Newcomers have to pay a small entrance fee. Let's call it insurance so that nothing bad happens to them." Evgeny and Mikhail stood on either side of Adelina, so close that she could smell their eau de cologne. The cafeteria was deathly silent. The 200 students watched the proceedings as if they were an evening performance. Alina asked calmly, more interested than challenging, what exactly this insurance was for. Daniil shrugged and said that it was because of the overstocked lockers, missing books, and crowds in the hallways. It was funny how some people behaved incompetently here, especially those who did not belong here. Mikhail added this with a caustic smile. Alina placed the tray of food on the nearest table and, turning to Daniil, remained calm, but a spark of change lit up her eyes. I'm not going to pay for some kind of protection. These words hung in the air like a challenge. Daniil's smile faded for a moment, but soon regained its former strength. That's where you're wrong, girl. It's not like that at all. Paying is just a matter of choice, to do it easily or with great effort. He came closer, his voice became deeper and dropped to a whisper, which, despite the silence in the hall, was clearly audible. If you think that you are too special for our small system and superior to everyone else, I will not pay at all, she said, taking it under her breath and heading towards a free table. Alexei stood motionless, clearly not expecting such a direct and conscious refusal. Everyone in the cafeteria watched what was happening. This is not the end, he shouted loudly after her, so that everyone could hear. No one dares to disrespect me in my school. No one. Alina sat down and calmly unwrapped her sandwich, as if nothing had happened, but secretly watched every move of Daniil, who left the hall in the company of his friends. In another corner of the cafeteria, Oleg shook his head and quietly spoke to his friend. She did not even realize that she had started something. Gradually, the conversations resumed, but the atmosphere had changed. Soon, rumors of this incident spread throughout the school. The new girl had just declared war on Alexei Kuznetsov. Alina took a bite of her sandwich and chewed slowly, hoping to get through at least one day without trouble. However, some moments were inevitable, and giving in to the bullies was not in her plans. The main thing now was not whether Alexei would take revenge, but when and how far he was ready to go in his actions. The persecution began towards the end of the second lesson. Alina approached the locker, holding the keys in her hands, but the lock was open. She tried to open the lock again, using the combination she had memorized in the morning. But nothing changed. At that moment, Mikhail appeared nearby with a sly smile and said that locks can be capricious, especially if someone damages them. Alina carefully examined the mechanism, and Bibi found gum in the hole. Such behavior seemed frivolous to her. This is just the beginning, Oleg said, stepping back to see her reaction. Alexei had a very good memory for events. Third period American history was going smoothly. However, as Alina was packing her books, she noticed that her notebook with notes from the last 3 days was missing. She checked the contents of her bag twice before admitting that the notebook was missing. In the hallway, she saw Mikhail showing the notebook to a group of freshmen, mockingly reading her handwriting. Look at this neat handwriting. She probably thinks it's special, he said. Alina approached him without emotion and said, This is my notebook. Give it back. Mikhail held the notebook up high like a school bully and replied, Maybe if you ask nicely, I'll think about giving it to you. She didn't beg or try to take it by force. Instead, she took out her phone and took a picture of him holding the notebook. What are you doing? Mikhail asked. His knees began to buckle as he noticed her actions, knowing he had proof. Alina put her phone in her pocket, preparing to file a theft report. Mikhail's face turned red and he dropped the notebook at her feet. The pages scattered across the hallway floor as Alina bent down to pick up the scattered sheets. Her gaze fell on her old sneakers, and she looked up to see Marcus Thompson, the same student who had made the mocking remark during lunch. You need advice, Marcus said quietly, looking around to make sure no one was listening. I'm listening, Alexei Kuznetsov replied. He wasn't just a powerful guy. He was the son of a man who ran a significant portion of the city's businesses, including the car dealership where Alina's mother worked. His uncle was also the chief of police. When Alexei wanted something, it always happened. Irina Smirnova stood up, clutching the notes she'd found tightly. Are you trying to scare me? She asked. I'm just trying to protect you, Marcus answered confidently, sincerely and attentively. A year ago, a similar situation had happened to a guy named Miguel Santovs, a transfer student like Alexei. He'd gotten too close to a girl he liked, and as a result, he'd gotten a bloody nose and 3 broken ribs. The official version was that Miguel had fallen down the stairs, but that was hard to believe. 2 weeks later, he transferred to another city. Marcus came closer and added, I understand that it is important to resist, but Alexei does not play fair, and he has support. Whatever you are planning, you should think about whether it is worth doing. Alina could barely answer, as Marcus disappeared into the crowd of students rushing to class. The day was becoming increasingly difficult due to constant harassment and conflicts. During lunch, someone accidentally spilled chocolate. Milk spilled on her backpack, and in the chemistry lab, her safety glasses were missing. So she had to use scratched ones, through which it was difficult to see the exact readings. By the end of the lesson, one pattern became noticeable. Alexei's team took turns making her life difficult, always finding convincing excuses and acting in such a way that it was difficult to suspect malicious intent. Witnesses claimed that these were accidents, not persecution. However, Period 7 was out of the ordinary. Alina was sitting in English class, trying to concentrate on discussing the book. To Kill a Mockingbird? When Daniil raised his hand, the teacher smiled encouragingly. Mrs. Patterson, I think it would be worth hearing our new girl's opinion on the book. I'm sure she has some original views on the subject. The hint was obvious, but the girl responded thoughtfully, talking about prejudice and moral fortitude in the work. She spoke for about 2 minutes, clearly and intelligently expressing her thoughts. When Alina finished, Daniil began to slowly applaud. Wow, that was well said. You really have a way with your thoughts. He paused, emphasizing the subtext with his words. You know, it's nice to listen to someone who articulates their ideas so clearly. The class fell silent. Irina Smirnova's face flushed, but she looked as if time had stood still, unsure how to respond to the obvious hint of racism without making the situation worse. Alina said thank you calmly. She was glad that her ability to articulate her thoughts was appreciated. Daniil's smile faded slightly at her restrained response. However, he continued the conversation. It's just nice to see that, you know? Sometimes people from certain walks of life find it difficult to participate in academic discussions. The atmosphere in the classroom grew even more tense. Several students shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Alina said firmly, I'm sure you'll see how people from all walks of life can surprise you. Her voice was like tempered iron. When the bell rang, she calmly gathered her books and left the classroom, holding her head high. However, something new was beginning to dawn on her, as if the game was ending. Daniil had just crossed the line, touching something that could not be taken back. His laughter echoed along with his friends in the hallway. He seemed to be congratulating himself on his success, unaware of the storm he had caused. Friday morning for Alina began with the fact that her locker was decorated. Someone had attached a banana to the metal door with tape and a note on it, where in small letters it was written, Welcome to the jungle. Obviously, the work of Daniil. Alina filmed the message without any emotion, realizing that the students were impatiently awaiting her reaction. Some looked confused, others quietly chuckled. She, Alina, crumpled the note and threw it in the trash can, but decided to keep the film as evidence. Don't you like such a gift? Daniil said loudly on purpose, approaching with his usual company, so that those gathered could hear these words. I thought that perhaps you lack real urban wilderness, he added mockingly. Very original, Alina answered, closing the cabinet with a deliberate hint of coldness in her voice. But the handwriting will have to be corrected. It will be easier to identify the culprit. Daniil's jaw muscles tensed. He rarely encountered resistance from his victims, especially in front of others. The hallway filled with whispers. Students pulled out their phones, preparing to film what was happening. Irina Smirnova felt something important and disturbing approaching. All day long, the bullying had become more and more noticeable and distinct. In gym class, someone had secretly sprinkled a powder that caused severe itching on her gym uniform. During lunch, Mikhail Belov deliberately pushed Alina, causing her tray to fall to the floor. Ouch, Mikhail said with a wide smile. I hope you're not too clumsy to clean this up. Alina bent down to pick up the spilled food, and the other students avoided her. They tried to help her several times, but she politely refused. She could tolerate Daniil's jokes, but she could no longer hide how much she was embarrassed by the audience, who were clearly enjoying this performance. The turning point was the 8th period, and when independent work was in progress. Alina was sitting alone at the last table and doing an assignment on mathematical analysis, when Daniil approached her with a group of friends. The teacher, who was observing the lesson, left the class, leaving about 30 students unattended. "Hello, everyone," Daniil said loudly, and his voice echoed around the room. "I have something interesting for you," he added, taking out his phone. Suddenly, Alina's voice came through the small Bluetooth speaker. It was a recording of her conversation from the previous English lesson, but heavily altered and edited. Her thoughtful musings on social injustice were superimposed on other audio clips, giving the impression that she was making harsh and provocative statements about white people. The distorted recording showed Alina angry and relying on her disgust for her new outsider classmates. The students looked stunned and confused, some even angry. "I guess now we know what she really thinks about us," Daniel said, pushing the phone away with a satisfied smile. "It's good to finally hear her real thoughts." Alina remained motionless as whispers spread around her. Some looked at her with suspicion, others with disgust. A few realized that the recording was doctored, but their opinions were not heard. "That's not what I said." Alina's voice cut through the noise, but Daniil did not allow her to get a word in. "Are you calling me a liar?" "Just now, everyone heard you distorting the notes to make me look bad." Daniil walked closer to her part and said, "Why should I make something up? Everyone knows who you really are now." At that moment, the door to the independent study room opened and Mrs. Chen walked in. The room fell silent. The students were immersed in their assignments. "Is everything okay?" Mrs. Chen asked, noticing the tense atmosphere. "Everything is fine," Daniel replied with the smile of a man who knows how to act. "We were just discussing the latest events." When the bell rang, Alina gathered her books, her hands shaking slightly. Students began to leave the classroom. Some avoided looking in her direction, others looked directly at her. The damage had already been done. By morning, Alexi's corrected post would be all over social media. On her way to her last class, she heard snippets of conversation. "I can't believe she said that. She seemed so quiet and sweet." Alexei was right in his suspicions about her. After class, Alina saw Evgeny waiting for her at her locker. "This post was falsified," he said quietly. "I was sitting in English class and I heard what you actually said. That's not the point now. Alina, the damage has already been done. Can you prove that the recording was doctored, or should I go directly to the source?" Marcus grabbed her hand and warned, "Don't act rashly. Daniel is waiting for your reaction. He probably has everything calculated. He wants to make you look like the aggressor, get you expelled, or worse." After the arrest, Alina met Evgeny's worried gaze, and then glanced at the surrounding students. Many were still whispering among themselves and pointing at her. Daniel was purposefully leading a campaign to isolate and humiliate her. Every action he took was calculated to provoke a response from Alina and thereby justify his own cruelty. Perhaps it was time to give him what he was waiting for. She shook off his hand and headed for the exit. At that moment, Evgeny's voice was heard from behind. "Alina, don't do this. It's not worth it." However, sometimes certain moments require greater effort. Her honor was more valuable than anything. The right to study in this place without constant pressure was worth the fight. Sometimes the only way to stop a bully is to prove that the victim can stand up for herself. Outside, Daniel and his friends were having fun in the parking lot, probably celebrating another successful way to undermine Alina's reputation. They looked so smug and confident in their superiority. Alina dropped her backpack at the exit and decided not to give in. She entered the school and walked confidently towards them. It was time to talk, and on her terms. Usually, Daniil talked a lot, but now he was silent and still laughing at the video. When he noticed Alina walking across the parking lot, his laughter suddenly stopped, seeing her determined gait and the way she dropped her backpack like a heavy load. He said ironically, "I wonder who finally dared to speak up." He straightened up, and Oleg and Mikhail automatically stood at his sides, preparing to apologize for their unfriendliness. She stopped a few steps away from them. Her voice was tense and clear. "I no longer intend to put up with your insidious games. Daniil, the lies of persecution, and all of this will end right now." "It will stop when I say so," Daniel answered firmly, gaining confidence in front of the group of students who stopped, feeling the heat of passion. Do you really think that you can come to my school and show disrespect? Think again. What is your school? Alina took a step forward. As far as I know, this is a state-run school funded by taxes, including my mother's. Alexei's face turned red with anger. Don't try to outsmart me. You are vastly outnumbered and outranked. Better leave while you can. She tried to distance herself, but he followed her, ignoring all her attempts. She had been patient, and now she said, "Do as I say." Alina took another step forward. Mikhail snapped his fingers. Are you sure you want to continue? 3 against 1. It's not to your advantage. And you shouldn't hurt anyone who stands up for you. She thought she couldn't fight back, but she was wrong. The best tactic was to remain calm. Alina's voice didn't change, although her stance changed slightly. Her weight shifted to the balls of her feet. This was her last chance. She thought, Alexei, just leave me alone and then everything will be fine. Alexei laughed. His harsh laughter echoed through the daylight. You are so naive. What are you going to do, call your mother? The moment Alexei reached for her hand, Alina responded instantly, using her skills. She worked precisely and smoothly, deftly dodging the grab, grabbing his wrist and, using his own movement, knocking him off his feet. As he was recovering, her elbow landed squarely in his solar plexus, bending his body in half. Oleg lunged forward, swinging his arms, but it looked furious and awkward. Alina ducked and grabbed his legs, knocking him down onto the hard asphalt. Mikhail froze in amazement, finally realizing that their plan was falling apart. Alexei straightened up heavily, puffing, but the anger did not disappear from his eyes. He said, You think you're really that strong? Let's see how long this lasts. A fierce fight ensued. Alexei had the strength and fury, but Alina had the skill and 8 years of hard training. She moved as fluidly as water, confidently dodging clumsy attempts to grab or hit her, and landing precise blows whenever the opportunity arose. Oleg and Mikhail tried to intervene, but either got in Alexei's way or were hit by Alina themselves. The fight moved across the parking lot, with Alexei tirelessly waving his arms and stubbornly refusing to go down. By the end of the fight, Daniil was lying face down on the asphalt. Irina Smirnova's knee was pressed between his shoulder blades. They had walked almost half a block. Daniil's nose was bleeding freely. Oleg's eye was swollen, and Mikhail was carefully holding his ribs. Are we done with Fisho? Alina asked. Her breathing was even, despite the strain. Get away from me, Daniil muttered with difficulty, gasping for breath. Are we really done? She repeated, pressing lightly. Okay, we're done. You leave me alone without any scuffles, chases, or fake videos. Is everything clear? Alina said sternly. Understand? They answered her. Alina let go of the guy and stepped aside, watching as Daniil rolled over and sat up. Blood was slowly trickling from his nose. A small group of witnesses stood silently around, as if assessing the situation. Great conversation, Alina noted, and headed back to the school for her backpack. At this time, in the building, the director Irina Smirnova, finishing her paperwork, heard a knock on the door. The secretary said, Ms. Smirnova, there was an incident in the parking lot. They say there was a fight between students. The director sighed, put on her jacket, and asked how serious it was. She was told that calling an ambulance was not necessary, but she needed to see everything with her own eyes. Irina, hurrying to the street, noticed Alexei Kuznetsov wiping blood from his face, while Evgeny and Mikhail Belov helped him up. A group of guys with phones stood nearby, and a lively noise filled the air. What happened here? The director demanded. Nothing, Daniil muttered, avoiding eye contact. We were just joking. Alexei, you're bleeding. This is no joke. I fell. Daniil quickly justified himself, not taking his eyes off the ground. Irina looked doubtful, but before she could say anything, Daniil and his friends had already left, leaning on Oleg Vasiliev. The next day, rumors quickly turned into a real legend. Some claimed that Alina used a weapon. Others claimed that she managed to deal with 5 guys at once. The truth was impressive, but school gossip is rarely based on facts. In second period, Jessica Alina, a sophomore, walked up to her locker, filled with anxiety, followed quietly by her friend Amber. "Hey," Jessica whispered, looking around to make sure no one was listening. "Can I talk to you about something?" Alina looked at both girls carefully. Jessica looked scared, but there was a determination in her eyes, while Amber seemed ready to run at the first hint of danger. "What happened?" Alina asked. "We heard about what happened yesterday with Daniil and his gang," Jessica continued, then turned to Alina with a request. Amber hesitantly added, barely audible, that she was talking about the guys from school who had been harassing them at the bus stop after class yesterday. The girls were silent for a moment, exchanged glances, and then pulled out Amber's backpack, poured out all the contents, and insulted her with horrible words. They said they would return today to continue the conversation. Alina closed the locker and turned fully to face her friends. "What exactly do you want me to do?" she asked. Jessica, her voice shaking with a mixture of hope and fear, said, "Will you come with us to the bus stop today? Maybe if they see you there, they'll let us go." Alina looked at her friends' scared faces and thought of Daniel's bloody nose, the edited video, and every little humiliation that had led to yesterday's conflict. "What time is your bus?" she asked. 3:15, the girls answered. Alina headed for the bus stop on Weil Street with Evgeny and Amber. The afternoon sun cast long shadows between the houses, and a cool breeze played with the leaves above their heads. They walked side by side. The tension in the air was almost palpable. "The bus usually shows up around 3, Evgeny whispered, checking his phone. According to the schedule, the bus wasn't scheduled until 3:45. That meant there was still plenty of time. "What exactly are we going to do?" Alina asked. Amber's voice was timid and shaky. "Yesterday, they surrounded us, told us that we looked lonely and needed company. When I tried to leave, one of them grabbed my arm and accused me of being rude. Then they scooped up my backpack and made me pack my things under their watchful eyes. Evgeny added that if we told anyone, they would make us regret it." Alina nodded, looking around the street. There were 3 of them. Mikhail Belov, the leader, a tall guy with bleached hair, Connor with the tattoos on his arm, and Tyler, the one who grabbed Amber. At 3:22, the broken camera turned onto Maple Street. Music blared from the speakers. The car slowed down, approaching the bus stop. A group of 3 young men appeared at the bus stop, acting confidently, as if they owned the area. Mikhail noticed Alina right away. His eyes narrowed in surprise. He asked, "Who's the new one?" To which Jessica quickly replied, "Nobody, just a girl waiting for the bus." Connor got excited, showing the tattoos on his forearms. To him, this was a man who was completely alien to these places. Tyler approached Amber, and she automatically stood behind Alina, protecting her. He asked, "Did you bring backup, dear?" "This is clearly an unfriendly act," Alina answered firmly. Her voice sounded clear on the quiet street. "I came to talk specifically to you 3. Mikhail's eyebrows rose. "About what, exactly?" he asked. "About you stopping torturing these girls," Alina stated with confidence. The 3 guys looked at each other and screamed in laughter. Connor wiped his eyes dramatically. "It's funny, backup, just some girl who thinks she's cool. I'm not making any judgments." Alina replied calmly, "I'm just saying that your stalking ends now." Tyler stepped forward, clearly violating Amber's personal space. "And if we don't want to stop, then you'll find out that some people are not so easy to deal with." Mikhail moved to stand on Alina's left, and Connor on the right. "You know, I like you. You have spirit. Why don't you leave these losers and hang out with real men?" he suggested. "I'm not interested in hanging out with boys who bully other kids." Tyler's voice became mocking. "These aren't kids. They're old enough to know what respect is." He reached out to grab Amber's shoulder. At that moment, Irina Smirnova reacted instantly. With her left hand, she grabbed Tyler's hand, which was pointed at Amber, twisting it. The right hand struck, and Tyler cried out, retreating and clutching his sore wrist. "What's going on, Connor?" He took a step forward, but Alina had already changed her position. "This is your last warning," she said, getting into a fighting stance and preparing for further action. Instead of moving away, Mikhail lunged from the left and Connor from the right. Alina ducked, grabbed Mikhail's legs and threw him to the ground, simultaneously turning and slamming her elbows into Connor's stomach. Both men fell to the ground with a crash. Tyler, limping and clutching his wrist, pulled out his phone. "Crazy witch, I'll call the police," he threatened. But Alina calmly answered, "Do whatever you want, keeping your eyes on Mikhail and Connor, who were trying to get up. Tell them how 3 seniors beat up 2 younger girls. I don't think that will help you much." At that moment, Evgeny was filming everything that was happening on his phone. "I have proof," he said confidently. When Tyler tried to grab Amber, Mikhail, wiping the blood from his split lip, looked at Alina with new respect and determination. "You have no idea who you've gotten yourself into. 3 cowards who pick on girls are no match for us." "You know, I have a plan," Alina answered calmly. Connor limped back to the car, completely losing his previous confidence. "This is not the end," he tried to object. "No, this is the end," Irina Smirnova said firmly. "If I see any of you near these girls again, the next conversation will be completely rude." Tyler tried to say something, but no one listened to him. Someone wanted to object, but Mikhail suddenly grabbed his hand and said, "Let's get out of here." When Kamaro Rhea drove away with a squeal, Jessica lowered the phone and her hands began to shake slightly. "My God, that was just incredible," she exclaimed. "Are you both okay?" Alina asked carefully, looking at the girls. Amber nodded, tears of relief glistening in her eyes. "Thank you, I can't believe you did it. They thought you'd be too scared to answer," she explained. Alina noted that bullies always count on this. The bus turned the corner. The brakes squealed as they approached the stop. Jessica had already started uploading the video to her social media by the time she got on the bus. "Everyone needs to see this," she said excitedly. "Everyone needs to know that someone is finally standing up to these bastards." Alina sat down, unaware that Jessica's video would rack up a ton of views in just a few hours, making her an internet sensation overnight. By 7 p.m., the video had been reposted more than 300 times. By 9 p.m., it had been viewed 1,000 times. The caption read, "A girl stands up to bullies who are harassing school children at a bus stop. Someone finally found the strength to fight back." The comments came from students in 3 different school districts. Stories of harassment, threats, and violence used to be whispered in school hallways. Now, these topics have surfaced for public discussion. This is the girl who stood up to Alexei Kuznetsov. It's high time someone tried to fight the Riverside gang, and she should start teaching self-defense classes. Meanwhile, in another part of town, Daniil Kuznetsov sat in his room, holding an ice pack to his still swollen nose and watching the video for the 5th time. His phone was buzzing with messages. Friends were sending him links and asking if this was the girl who had humiliated him. "This just can't be," he muttered, scrolling through the comments. Some were already connecting the dots, telling stories of their own encounters with Alina Smirnova in the school parking lot. Suddenly, his phone rang. Oleg Vasiliev's name appeared on the screen. "Do you see this?" Oleg's voice was filled with fury. "My father sees all this. He's already asking why I look like I've been hit by a car. She's making us look like real idiots. First, we, now the guys from Riverside, are called her superheroes." Daniil's jaw clenched tightly. She wasn't a superhero at all. She was just twice lucky. At the same time, in Riverside, Mikhail Belov was talking to his comrades in much the same tone. "How could we show ourselves so defenseless?" Connor demanded. He paced the garage while Tyler held his sore wrist. 3 against 1 girl, and we lost because she knew how to fight, and we didn't expect that," said Mikhail. But his voice sounded uncertain. Tyler turned on the video again. "Look at her after the fight. She doesn't even look tired. Now everyone calls us cowards and hooligans." "We are hooligans," Connor said sharply. "That's the point. Fear holds people back, keeps them on edge. But if we find out that an ordinary high school girl can defeat us, then our reputation will be at risk," concluded Mikhail Belov. After this, the respect for us at Millbrook High School may disappear completely. The situation has caused a new kind of conflict, because those students who had previously kept silent about their problems suddenly found the courage to speak out. Principal Irina Smirnova came to work on Monday morning and immediately noticed that her voicemail was overflowing with messages from parents. Some demanded that Alina Smirnova be expelled for alleged violence, while others praised her for protecting her children. Most asked why the school had not yet taken action regarding the bullying their children had reported. Secretary Mrs. Chen brought the principal a stack of reports from the weekend. 12 students had complained of harassment, and each statement mentioned the video, which became a reason to realize that silence was no longer an option. Irina looked through the papers, and with each page her anxiety grew stronger. How had they managed to miss all of this before? Some incidents occurred outside school grounds, and other children said they reported them but received no response. During her first period, Alina found herself surrounded by kids who wanted to thank her, ask questions, or just be around someone who was challenging a system that had failed them. Sophomore Evgeny, whose own report detailed months of bullying from seniors, said, "You're like a character in an action movie," Alina said. "I'm not a hero. I was just tired, so they pushed me." Even when the kids were supportive, the leadership was trying to take control of the situation. Principal Martinez called an emergency school board meeting, where the conversation quickly turned to options. The incident had happened outside the school, and Board Chair Walsh insisted they could distance themselves from the event entirely. "Can we really?" Principal Martinez asked, turning on the video on her laptop. Half of the responses proved that our school does have a bullying problem that the administration is choosing to ignore. Councilman Johnson leaned forward and asked what specific measures they were proposing. "I think we should listen to these students. They are concerned not only about the school's reputation," he said. The atmosphere in the hall became tense. The counselors argued heatedly about whether to support Alina Smirnova or to take disciplinary action for the fight. At the same time, petitions from parents demanding self-defense lessons and increased safety at the school were rapidly gaining popularity on the internet. By lunchtime, more than 50 students had joined the support group created by Evgeny. The main goal of this association was to provide a safe space for those who had become victims of bullying and to seek changes in the school rules for protecting children. As Alina walked along the corridors, she felt the atmosphere change. Those students who had previously been indifferent began to show solidarity and support, trying to avoid looking in her direction. Now the teachers nodded in a friendly manner as a sign of respect. Those who had previously ignored the quiet manifestations of bullying became much more attentive. But Alina also noticed that Daniil and his gang of scythes were looking at her with obvious disdain. There was a sharp hatred, and she knew that although she had won 2 conflicts, the battle was far from over. The viral video had brought her widespread fame and support, but it had also made her a much bigger and more important target than before. In the early hours of Tuesday, Alina was called into the principal's office before the first lesson. Irina Smirnova sat at her desk with a tired expression, as if she had not slept for many hours, answering calls. "Please sit down," she said, pointing to the chair in front of her. "We need to discuss what happened at the bus stop. The students were being harassed, and I stepped in to help them. But outside the school, the principal opened a folder on her desk. Since yesterday, I have received 17 calls from parents. Some want you expelled, while others, on the contrary, want to reward you. The school council will meet tonight to decide what to do." Alina remained calm. "What situation are we talking about?" "I protected 2 students from an attack. You knocked down 3 guys and posted the video on the internet," the principal said. "I didn't post anything," Alina replied. "These guys were terrorizing the students at our school." The principal put her hand to her temples and admitted that the situation was extremely difficult. "I understand your irritation, but you can't do justice yourself." "You have protocols," Alina replied. "Your school rules didn't stop Daniil Kuznetsov from stalking me for a week. They didn't protect Evgeny from attacks and threats." The principal started to speak, but suddenly fell silent. "Listen, I want to help you. The school board would prefer this situation to be resolved calmly. If you agree to stop and we maintain physical discipline, we can probably avoid suspension. But if I don't agree, we'll have to consider more serious measures." Alina stood up from her chair. "Think about my words, please." Your situation is very unstable. When Alina left the office, Evgeny and 3 other students were waiting for her in the hallway. Did you hear that you were called? Alexei asked worriedly. Are you having some kind of problem? He added. And Alina, heading for her locker, answered. Why? Alexei quickened his pace to walk next to her. The guys and I discussed the situation and wanted to know if you could teach us anything. The girl stopped and said seriously, What exactly? Evgeny's voice became firmer. How do you fight back? How do you protect yourself? I've been teased and pushed around since 7th grade, and yesterday was the first time no one dared. Everyone's afraid you're watching them, but that's temporary. So we need to learn to stand up for ourselves. A girl named Sarah stepped forward. My older brother goes to Riverside. He said the kids you fought with were up to something. They were nervous and aggressive. What was it? Alina asked. He didn't give any details, but he advised her to be careful on the way home. In the sports office, Coach Rodriguez was talking seriously with Principal Martinez. Are you really going to ban her from using the gym? He asked, folding his arms. For what exactly? He asked. For starting an unsanctioned martial arts program, the parents call it a fight club. You've seen what she does, right? She teaches the kids basic defense and helps them gain confidence. That's what's really needed. About half of the students were talking about that. The principal shook her head and pointed out that their insurance only covered a fraction of what they would face if one of these situations turned into something truly serious. Coach Rodriguez leaned forward and said, Sarah, I've been teaching here for 12 years, and I've never seen such enthusiasm for physical fitness as I have this week. The school board, however, saw things differently. Perhaps they could spend time in the hallways of the school and observe how the kids interacted, and how the ones who had been teasing were now engaged in other activities. That same day, after school, Alina Smirnova walked into the gym to find about 30 students waiting patiently for her. Despite the administration's concerns, word had spread quickly. Students who had previously found little common ground were now united by their shared experiences of bullying and their desire to change their current situation. I spoke with Principal Martinez, Alina announced. The school board does not approve of our meeting here in the gym. There were quiet murmurs of discontent, but Alina quickly took the floor and explained, It will be after school. Coach Rodriguez approved the use of the gym and left the room himself, clarifying, This fitness center designed to teach self-defense and develop internal confidence fully complies with school standards. The students exploded with enthusiastic cries, but Alina raised her hand, demanding silence, and said, Before we begin, it is important to understand that our goal is not to fight. We are learning the skills and confidence to be able to protect ourselves and others. We do not seek conflict, but we do not run from them either. The classes began with learning the basic techniques. Irina Smirnova noticed that Daniil and Oleg were watching closely through the glass doors of the gym. Their faces expressed a mixture of irritation and, perhaps, anxiety. Daniil turned to Oleg and said, Look, she is forming her army. How can we deal with this? A cold and confident smirk played on his lips. We will show everyone that there are consequences for actions. At this point in the gym, the students were practicing wrist-breaking techniques and learning to release tension with words, unaware that their newly acquired confidence had become a serious threat to those who were used to maintaining their authority by using the fear of others. By the end of the week, Alina Smirnova's self-defense program had attracted more than 60 kids. The gym was filled with the noise of activity and energy. The teenagers were diligently practicing techniques to escape from holds and building their confidence. In class, the kids learned to express their strength through body language. Alina loudly reminded everyone in the gym, Our main goal is always to reduce tension and resolve the situation peacefully. Fighting is a last resort, not the first option for resolving a conflict. Sarah, who had been shy and silent just a week ago, was now standing tall and confident, practicing self-defense techniques. She shared with Alexei Kuznetsov during the break, I can't believe how much my feelings have changed. I really feel in control of myself and the situation. Alexei, wiping the sweat from his forehead, replied, Yesterday, when the seniors tried to provoke me in the hallway, I just looked them in the eye and walked on. and they walked away. Meanwhile, Coach Rodriguez watched the training from his office and took notes for Principal Martinez. The transformation of the students was truly amazing. The changes were evident not only in their appearance, but also in their behavior. They walked with their heads held high, spoke confidently, and seemed to support each other, which no one had noticed before. While the program was confidently moving forward in the gym, decisive blows were being dealt to it from the outside. That same Friday evening, Daniil Kuznetsov was sitting in his car in the parking lot of a 24-hour cafe on the outskirts of town, waiting. His nose had healed, but the feeling of bitterness and defeat remained. The video of his humiliation had been viewed over 10,000 times, and the comments disgusted him. At 8:30, the beaten Kamara arrived, and they stopped near the car from which Mikhail Bailov got out. Connor and Tyler followed him. All three looked as irritated and angry as Daniil. He swore at the spot for a long time, then asked when they had already sat down opposite him and Oleg Vasiliev. "Why was it necessary to make sure that no one was following us?" Mikhail answered in a tense voice. "It is important that another video does not spread on the internet." He fidgeted nervously as he continued. "I still think this is a bad idea, and if anyone finds out we're together," Daniel cut in sharply, "no one will know unless you want to talk." Connor leaned forward and said, "Look, everyone has the same problem. This girl has made us look weak. Now no one is afraid to stand up to us. Our authority is in great decline." Then Oleg added, "And that's not all. She teaches other kids to defend themselves. Yesterday, some freshman actually fought back when I tried to contact him." Tyler nodded angrily, explaining, "Everything has changed at school now. Before, kids just paid for lunch, but now they've decided to be brave." Daniil took out his phone and showed a video of training filmed that same day. "She has 60 students learning to fight. In a month, there will be 100 of them." Mikhail asked, "What to do now?" A cold and calculating smile appeared on Daniil's face. "We can't use physical force anymore. There are too many witnesses and cameras around, but we can get rid of her legally." "In what way exactly?" Connor asked. "With an assault charge. My father knows people in the legal field." Daniil answered calmly. "We intend to file complaints with the police, stating that she attacked us without reason, and we will try to get her arrested. This may lead to expulsion from the educational institution, and in the worst case, to sending her to a correctional facility for minors." Alexei frowned, but noted that there was a video of the actual events and it could be faked. Daniil calmly replied that especially if you had a good lawyer who could explain the situation to the judge correctly. "My father had already discussed all of this with our family lawyer." Mikhail asked about the incident at the bus stop. The video was available to everyone. It showed 3 high school students against 1 girl. "We would claim that she was armed and that we were just defending ourselves. Who would believe that we intentionally harmed these second-grade schoolgirls?" Oleg nodded slowly, understanding. "Once she is arrested, her little fight club will fall apart, the children will be afraid again, and we will take control of the situation." Mikhail looked dubious. "This could backfire on us. What if people don't believe our version of events?" "He will," Daniil answered confidently, explaining that his family has influence in this city, which cannot be said about hers. "According to him, we are the victims here, and she is not." The 6 guys spent an hour developing a detailed plan of action, coordinating their versions and planning to simultaneously file complaints and act as a single team, claiming that Alina Smirnova is a threat and attacked innocent students without reason. Meanwhile, at school, Alina finished training, unaware that a special kind of legal trap had been prepared for her. On Monday, Sarah asked when all the things would be collected, and Alina confidently answered that this would definitely happen. She also advised practicing situational awareness on the weekends and trusting your instincts. After class, the students left the hall, animatedly sharing their impressions and discussing their successes. Coach Rodriguez approached Alina and quietly asked if she had managed to achieve anything important. She noticed that the boys were different, much stronger. In fact, they had always been strong. They just needed to remember that. However, Alina warned that such changes could be frightening for some. especially those who were used to benefiting from the old system. She nodded, gathering her things, feeling the tension that had been building all week. During these days, Daniil and his friends had been watching her movements closely. Conversations died down whenever she appeared in sight, creating a sense that serious changes were brewing beneath the surface. Little did she know that a real storm was about to begin, one that would threaten not only her fighting skills, but also her belief in justice. On Monday morning, Irina Smirnova received a call that changed everything. She was looking through patient data at the hospital when an unfamiliar number called. The voice on the other end of the line said, "Dr. Smirnova, this is Sergeant Hayes from the Melbrook Police Department. We need you to come to the station with your daughter." Irina's heart sank with excitement, and Evgeny, what happened did not cause harm. Madam was not hurt, but she was charged with assault. She needed to be brought in to give evidence. The charge of assault seems incredible because my daughter, we have complaints from 6 complainants. I advise you to contact a lawyer immediately. Irina's hands were shaking as she called Alina at school and then her manager to arrange emergency leave. By the time she arrived at Millbrook, law enforcement officers were already waiting in the principal's office. Principal Martinez looked shocked as she told them that 6 boys from 2 schools had filed formal complaints, claiming that Alina had attacked them without cause. "This is absurd," Irina stated firmly. "My daughter was just defending herself and protecting other students. The complaints tell a different story," Sergeant Hayes said calmly, leafing through the documents. The complaints showed that Alina was systematically attacking boys and demanding that restraining measures be taken. When Alina was told that she had to report to the office for the first time since moving to Millbrook, her calm was shaken. Seeing her mother's worried face and the policeman's serious gaze, she realized that the situation had taken on an unexpected scale. "Am I being arrested?" she asked quietly. "Not yet," Sergeant Hayes replied, "but you need to come to the police station for questioning. Your mother can accompany you." When the news spread through the school that Alina had been taken away by the police, chaos erupted among the students. Jessica Martinez burst into tears upon hearing the news. "It's my fault," she cried to Sarah. "If only I hadn't shown that video." "No," Sarah answered firmly, surprising even herself. The culprits were Daniil, Mikhail, and the rest of the bullies, who were not ready to accept that someone was finally standing up to them. In just 1 hour, the kids had gathered together, and Alexei had organized a chat called Justice for Alina, which had attracted over 200 participants within half an hour. The video of the conflict at the bus stop was widely shared, along with detailed comments revealing the real events. Marcus Thompson, who had recently tried to warn Alana, was now leading a spontaneous protest in the school cafeteria. He was talking to anyone who would listen. "They want to break her because she stood up for us," emphasizing that it was Alina who gave them the courage to fight back. At the police station, Alina was in the interrogation room with her mother and a lawyer who had been urgently hired by Dr. Irina Smirnova. "Tell me in detail what happened," began lawyer Messis Rodriguez. "Start with the first day of school." Alina laid out the entire chain of events. Daniil's demands for security, the escalating bullying, the edited video of the argument in the parking lot, and the conflict at the bus stop. Her mother listened, her anger growing, as each new detail came to light that Alina had never told her about before. "Why didn't you tell me about this?" asked Dr. Irina Smirnova, her voice filled with pain. "I thought I could handle it myself, and I knew that complaining to the school could only make things worse." Mrs. Rodriguez quickly wrote everything down in her notebook. "Is there anything else you'd like to add?" "Do you have evidence of bullying?" she asked. "I have some. I filmed the damage to my locker. There may be security footage of isolated incidents." At this point, Coach Rodriguez was having a serious conversation with Principal Martinez. "Do you realize this is wrong?" he asked, holding back his anger. "Have you seen what this girl has done for our students? How she has helped them, taught them how to protect themselves?" "My hands are tied," the principal replied, adding that 6 families had already filed complaints. The school board is in a difficult position because they are more afraid of litigation than they are of doing the right thing. Coach Rodriguez pressed on. "Let me finish. I watched Alexei Kuznetsov and his gang abuse children for years. I wrote reports, suggested penalties, but nothing changed. However, when one girl decided to stand up to them, everyone immediately started worrying about school violence. The conversation was interrupted by a knock on the door. Mrs. Chen walked in, looking worried. In the main hallway, about a dozen students were holding signs demanding that the charges against Alina be dropped. The signs read, "Justice for Alina and stop protecting bullies." They supported us, and the parents did not stand aside either. Many moms and dads came to help. Principal Martinez closed her eyes and asked to call the school board president to inform her of what was happening. As the protest continued outside, Dr. Irina Smirnova sat next to her daughter at the police station, watching her child deal with the aftermath. Alina quietly said, "No matter what happens, I'm proud of you." Smirnova grabbed her mother's hand tightly, knowing that the fight for her freedom was just beginning. But now she was not alone. 2 weeks before the trial, Alina sat at the kitchen table, rehearsing her testimony with Mrs. Rodriguez, the attorney who had become her passionate advocate, agreeing to work pro bono after she became convinced of the systematic abuse. "Remember," Mrs. Rodriguez said, tapping her pen on her legal pad, "stick to the facts and don't let the defense throw you off balance." Alina asked timidly, "And if the judge doesn't believe me, then we'll appeal," the lawyer replied. "But you'd be surprised how many people support you." At that moment, Dr. Irina Smirnova walked into the kitchen with a box of letters. "These are just for today," she said, placing the box heavily on the table. Letters of support from parents, students, and even teachers from other schools who had learned of the case. Mrs. Rodriguez smiled. The prosecutor's office received similar messages too. Public opinion is clearly on your side. In another part of town, Alexei Kuznetsov was having a very different conversation with his lawyer. Mr. Blackwood, impeccably dressed, with a cold gaze and an expensive watch, said calmly, "I want you to understand one important thing. The atmosphere in the Morozov family living room is hanging in the air. If there is even the slightest discrepancy in your testimony tomorrow, the case will fall apart, Daniil." He remained motionless, satisfied that there would be no contradiction, because there couldn't be any. False assault charges were just the tip of the iceberg. Giving false testimony was a serious criminal offense. Oleg and Mikhail exchanged worried glances on the leather couch as the gravity of what had happened became more and more palpable. The trial was approaching, and Mikhail asked cautiously, "What about the video? People will be able to see the real picture." To this, Blackwood replied calmly, "Video can always be played to distort the meaning. Our main focus is on the consistency of the victim's behavior. 6 different episodes make a defense based on self-defense impossible." At the same time, Alexei was in a state of crisis. At an emergency meeting with the guys from Riverside, Tyler walked restlessly around Konstantin's garage and admitted, "I think we made a mistake. What if they have evidence we don't know about?" Brad countered, but his voice no longer sounded as confident as before. Cameras, witnesses, everything seemed out of control. Konstantin nodded grimly. "My father says that if we lose, we'll be charged with perjury. He advises us to hire his lawyer. Your father is right." "There is cause for concern," Tyler confirmed. "Today, I learned that tomorrow about 20 students are going to testify in defense of Alina Smirnova from Millbrook." The students met in the school library for a final assembly organized by Marcus Thompson and Jessica Martinez. Marcus asked the group to be honest about what they saw and experienced, without exaggerating or adding questionable details. Then Alina raised her hand and asked what to do if they were accused of lying. Jessica answered that the main thing is not to lose their composure and continue to stand their ground, because their stories are true. Alexei nodded with confidence and admitted that he suffered 3 years of torment from Daniil, and now, finally, he is ready to tell those who can help. Coach Rodriguez, who was standing to the side, stepped forward and said that he was proud of their courage. He emphasized that testifying in court requires the same inner strength that Alina showed on that fateful day in the parking lot. Sarah asked if the coach himself would testify. He confirmed it and added that Principal Martinez would also be a witness, although he didn't know it yet. The students exchanged surprised glances. Marcus explained that the principal would confirm the bullying complaints that had previously gone unaddressed and help to uncover the general nature of the events that had taken place. That same day, Mrs. Rodriguez handed the principal a subpoena. After the meeting, all the students hugged, knowing that the next day would decide not only Alina's fate, but the entire atmosphere of their school. That night, Alina lay awake, pondering the approaching day. She lay on her bed, lost in her thoughts about what had led her to this moment. 8 months ago, she was a quiet girl from Detroit, focused on school and sports, and now she found herself in the center of a legal conflict that would change everything. A new community had changed her, and at the most unexpected moment, Jessica called with a text message. "No matter what happens, tomorrow you changed everything. Thank you." Words like these kept coming to her throughout the evening, from the students she had helped, from the parents of children who had found the courage to speak out, and from strangers inspired by her determination in her viral videos. It wasn't until 2 a.m. that Alina was able to fall asleep, knowing that in 8 hours she would walk into a courtroom carrying the hopes and fears of everyone who had ever been bullied, everyone who had stayed silent, everyone who believed that fighting for the truth was worth the risk. The law would determine her fate, but the real sentence had already been passed by those around her. She had inspired them with courage and faith in justice. The Millbrook County Courthouse was filled with a tense energy as supporters filled every available seat. Students, parents, and community members had arrived early, forming a long line that wrapped around the room. Judge Irina Thompson, a stern woman in her late 50s, called the hearing to order at 9 a.m. sharp. "The state charges Alina Smirnova with assault in the 2nd degree," she said. "Mr. Blackwood, please begin your opening statement." Alexei's defense attorney stood up confidently. His elegant suit caught everyone's attention. "Your Honor, this case concerns a series of baseless allegations. It concerns violence that the defendant allegedly inflicted on 6 innocent young men. We will prove that Alina Smirnova deliberately targeted my clients, and they attacked them, causing them bodily harm and deep mental suffering. The focus was on Daniil, who sat with his head down, as if assuming the role of the victim. These young men had led a normal life until they suddenly found themselves the objects of brutal violence. The woman who emanated aggression was clearly dangerous, based on the evidence presented. Alina had combat skills that she used to intimidate and harm others. Irina Smirnova spoke in her defense, and her speech was both firm and loud. She said, "Your Honor, this is not just a case of an unjustified attack, but a young woman who is fighting back and protecting herself and her loved ones from constant threats and ridicule. The evidence will show that my client's every action was a response to the growing danger and real blows from her accusers." The prosecution called Daniil as its first witness. He took the stand, clearly nervous and telling a prepared lie. According to him, Alina allegedly approached him politely in the school cafeteria with aggression. "I just wanted to be friendly with the new guy," he said, his voice shaking with insincere emotion. Daniil claimed that he offered to help with the adjustment, but on the contrary, he was met with hostility and threats. "And then what happened in the parking lot?" Prosecutor Blackwood asked persistently. "She cornered me and several of my friends after school. We tried to leave, but she followed us. When I tried to resolve the conflict, she suddenly attacked for no reason." He continued his story. Warnings were heard in the hall, and Mrs. Rodriguez began a cross-examination. "Alexei Kuznetsov, didn't you demand money from my client for protection on her very first day? I don't understand what you're talking about. Isn't this how you created an edited audio recording to discredit her in front of the other students?" Daniil was a little confused. His voice became less confident. "I didn't edit anything." "We'll see," Mrs. Rodriguez replied, and turned to the judge. "Your Honor, I would like to introduce evidence for the defense." Exhibit A. The courtroom fell silent. The original, unedited recording of Alina's discussion in English class began playing over the speakers. Daniel's edited version followed immediately. The difference was obvious and undeniable. Daniel's face turned red, and muffled whispers swept around him. "This was just a joke that you used to discredit my client in front of 30 students," Mrs. Rodriguez countered. "Objection," Blackwater said loudly. But the damage had already been done. The prosecution's case continued as Oleg Vasiliev and Mikhail Belov gave similar fabricated testimony. But their stories began to crumble under cross-examination. Mikhail disputed Oleg's timeline of events, and Oleg couldn't explain why surveillance footage showed them bullying other students on the very days they claimed to have been victims. When Brad Matthews took the stand to represent the Riverside boys, his testimony plummeted even more. "So you really insist on this?" Mrs. Rodriguez asked. 3 seniors had been intimidated by a girl at a bus stop. "She was being aggressive," he whispered. "That doesn't make sense." "Aggressive," she clarified. "Or maybe she was protecting 2 younger kids from being bullied." Mrs. Rodriguez showed the unedited video to Evgeny, which clearly showed Mikhail Belov and his gang threatening the girls before Alina intervened. The defense began the trial by questioning Marcus Thompson, whose testimony about Daniil's systematic bullying over 3 years was powerful. One by one, the students came to the stand to tell their stories of abuse, creating a clear sense of constant intimidation. Evgeny's moving accounts of what happened at the bus stop moved many jurors to tears. "Tyler grabbed my friend's hand when she tried to leave. We were scared and outnumbered. Alina saved us," she recalled. Sarah's account was no less compelling. Daniil and his gang made school life a living nightmare for those they targeted. Alina gave us hope that someone would finally stand up to them. Principal Martinez also reluctantly testified, admitting that the bullied students' complaints were ignored and that the school had failed to ensure the safety of the children. This gave the case an even more serious institutional character. And finally, Alina Smirnova herself took to the microphone. Her calm and confident answers stood in stark contrast to the nervous justifications of the other witnesses. She admitted, "I never sought to enter into conflict with anyone. Her only goal was to attend school and feel safe. When these events occurred, it was impossible to remain indifferent." She defended herself and those who could not stand up for themselves. In her closing statement, Ms. Rodriguez appealed directly to the judge's sense of justice. "Your Honor, the evidence presented leaves no room for doubt. My client was responding to repeated insults and attacks. To punish her for defending herself and others sends the message that abusers can act with impunity and that victims risk being prosecuted for self-defense." Judge Thompson went into deliberation for about half an hour, then returned to the courtroom. The entire courtroom froze as she turned her gaze on Alina Smirnova, and after carefully reviewing all the materials and testimony, found the defendant not guilty on all counts. Furthermore, the judge added, "I strongly recommend that the district attorney conduct an investigation into the possible perjury of the defendants." Loud applause erupted in the courtroom as Alina hugged her mother and attorney, finally freed from weeks of legal pressure. Judge Thompson's final gavel rang out loudly, echoing throughout the courthouse. At that moment, only Alexei Kuznetsov remained in the courtroom. Alina's face turned pale as she realized the seriousness of the charges of perjury. Her father beside her had changed. His gaze, once confident and stern, was now filled with barely contained anger. "You told me victory was guaranteed," Mr. Kuznetsov whispered to Blackwood. "You said the girl had no chance." As reporters began to approach them, Blackwood was packing his things, trying to distance himself from the failure. "Your son lied to me about the evidence. I couldn't do anything when those tapes came to light." His voice was heavy. Across the hall, Oleg Vasiliev and Mikhail Belov sat in confusion, silently watching the reactions of their parents as they tried to comprehend what had happened. Mrs. Vasilieva's face was pale with shock. The charge of perjury implied criminal prosecution. "Mom, we've only just begun," Oleg tried to explain, but his mother interrupted him. "We'll discuss this at home, and you'll personally call each family affected by this to ask for forgiveness." Meanwhile, the families of the students were leaving the courtroom in embarrassment, while the celebration in the court was only gaining momentum. The students who had testified surrounded Irina Smirnova with tears of joy and relief. "You did it?" Jessica exclaimed, hugging Irina. "Did you really beat them?" "We did it," Alina answered with a smile, looking at the faces of everyone who supported her. Dr. Irina Smirnova stood nearby, looking at her daughter with pride and surprise. a quiet girl who had recently moved from Detroit. At the same time, the guys from Riverside were experiencing their own shock. Brad Matthews watched the artificial situation, not hiding his excitement. The embodied image of a tough guy suddenly fell apart, and his father quietly left the room. Connor and Tyler followed, their confidence gone. "This is crazy," Tyler whispered as they pushed through the crowd. "We could end up in jail for this," Connor's mother urgently reminded him. He should have considered the consequences before lying under oath. Alina Smirnov had become a symbol of courage for the entire community a few months ago. "I'm so proud of you, honey," the woman said quietly as Alina approached. "Not only proud of you for winning, but proud of how you handled it," Mrs. Rodriguez added, putting away the papers with satisfaction. In 20 years of practice, she had rarely seen a case where justice was so obvious. "The district attorney will definitely charge you with perjury," she told the Smirnov family. Falsifying police reports and lying under oath meant these men could get into serious legal trouble. Outside the courthouse, news trucks lined the sidewalk. Reporters interviewed students, parents, and members of the community closely tied to the case. The story had grown beyond Millbrook into a national conversation about bullying, self-defense, and the system's failure to protect its students. "It sends an important message," Marcus Thompson told a reporter surrounded by dozens of teenagers. "You can't bully people and then be the victim when they defend themselves." The weeks after the trial were enlightening. Millbrook High had seen major changes. Principal Martinez, exhausted after her court appearance over failed bullying complaints, instituted new guidelines for handling reports of bullying. The zero-tolerance policy was no longer just words. It was action. Alexei Kuznetsov never set foot in the school again. He faced perjury charges and civil lawsuits from several families whose children had been harmed by his actions. The harassment led to his transfer to a private military academy in another state. His parents quietly sold their home and moved away, unable to remain in the community where their son's crimes had been uncovered. Oleg Vasilyev and Mikhail Belov admitted to filing false police reports. For this, they were given community service and probation. Both were required to attend regular counseling and anger management classes. Oleg's college scholarship was revoked, and Mikhail was permanently kicked off the football team. The boys from Riverside suffered similar punishments. Brad Matthews was expelled from school and charged with multiple counts of bullying after the victims testified in court. Connor and Tyler were suspended pending the outcome of the court case. Their reputations were seriously damaged. But the biggest change was that Alina's self-defense program was officially recognized and expanded throughout the school. 3 months after the trial, Coach Rodriguez watched more than 100 students actively participate in the program in the main gym. The list of students wanting to improve their rights and find safety had grown so long that evening classes and weekend workshops had been added. "I never thought it would grow this big," he said. Alina, teaching new students the basics of self-defense, responded, "Me too," correcting one of the students. It seemed like people were ready for something new. They just needed to believe in themselves. The program went far beyond simple physical defense, including training in conflict resolution, bystander intervention, and peer mediation. The students learned not only how to defend themselves, but also how to spot the first signs of bullying and prevent it before it got worse. Sarah, one of Alina's first students, now became a mentor for younger students. She told an excited group of 7th graders that the main thing is not to learn how to fight, but to understand that fear will no longer interfere. The changes were noticeable throughout the school. Relationships in the hallways changed. Students began to move more confidently, express their opinions more often, and, most importantly, support each other in difficult situations. Alexei, who had previously often fallen victim to Daniil, now leads a peer support group, helping children who are experiencing anxiety and depression after experiencing bullying. Mikhail explained to the new participants that Alina did not just teach them how to defend themselves. She showed that everyone has the right to feel safe and has inner strength. Developing such an atmosphere led to the fact that the influence of the program went far beyond the school space. Several schools in the district expressed interest in similar initiatives, and national anti-bullying organizations began reaching out for recommendations. The college noticed Alina's leadership skills and her importance in the community. One quiet spring Friday, 6 months after the court case, Alina found herself back where it all began in the cafeteria, where Daniil had first demanded a bribe. The atmosphere was different now. Students from different grades and social groups sat together at tables, conversations were lively, and the tension that had previously dominated the place had completely disappeared. Evgeny approached her desk with a letter in his hands and, smiling, said, "There's a letter for you at the main office." Alina opened the envelope and found a handwritten note from a student at a school in California, who said that her story had inspired him to start a self-defense group at his school. The group now has 30 members, and there hasn't been a single incident of bullying since the beginning of the semester. The letter read, "Thank you for showing us that the world doesn't have to tolerate evil." When Marcus sat down across from her and asked, "Another message?" Alina nodded and replied, "Yes, another one." As she put the letter away in her growing locker, she looked at the renovated cafeteria and then out to the schoolyard, where students were doing confidence exercises. It was then that Alina considered how much things had changed. Life had changed since she refused to pay Daniel for protection. She had come to Milbro expecting to get through school unhindered, but she had soon realized that the most important battles were the ones that chose you, not you that chose them. Sometimes, fighting for justice changes not only you, but the entire community around you. The bell rang to signal the end of lunch. Students were packing up their things and heading to class with energy and confidence. It was unimaginable before. A few months ago, Alina Smirnova had smiled as she picked up her things. Her mother had been right. Millbrook is a different place than Detroit. It's a different place, a more welcoming place, and she played a big part in making it that way. Walking through hallways that once seemed hostile to her, surrounded by peers who had found confidence and a voice, Alina realized, some battles are worth all the effort you put in. I hope this story resonated with you. Like the video and subscribe so you don't miss future episodes. In the meantime, here are 2 stories that you'll probably find interesting. Have a great day.